Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jonathan Weedle, and I am the Business Development Officer with the Durham Strategic Energy Alliance. We are a part of the Ontario Network of Excellence. I'd like to welcome all of you to this panel discussion on the theme, Developing Talent to Support Ontario's Innovation Ecosystem. Our panelists will highlight a number of Ontario-based organizations that offer programs designed to engage, educate, and inspire students in order to successfully build a talent pipeline that supports Ontario's innovation ecosystem. On behalf of Ontario Centers of Excellence, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Bonnie Schmidt, President and founder of Let's Talk Science, as moderator for this session. Let's Talk Science is a national charitable organization dedicated to improving science literacy. Bonnie currently serves on the board of directors of the Ontario Genomics Institute and is a member of Federal Granting Council Review Committee. Bonnie recently served as the founding president of the Science and Technology Awareness Network, STAN, and was a member of the Coalition for Action of Innovation in Canada and on the Ontario government's Early Learning Experts panel. She has organized sessions on science outreach at national and international academic conferences and has been an invited speaker at numerous science and education forums, including the 2009 and 2010 Science Policy Conferences. So please welcome Bonnie Schmidt.
Thanks, Jonathan. That's great. Well, we're just delighted to have this session here at Discovery this year. It's the first time that Discovery has taken a look at the whole talent pipeline before the university and college level. So we're really thrilled to be here and to be able to talk with everybody. I think before we get started, just so you have an idea of the way that we'll go through, we have 3 panel members here who I'll introduce. Then I'm going to spend a couple of minutes just giving a bit of a lay of the land with a few stats to ground the discussion. Each of the panel members will talk for about 5 minutes to give you an orientation to what they do. And then we're going to open it up because we actually want most of the session not to be us talking out to you, but to have more of an engaged interaction. Okay, so we will have mics here, and we'll do our best to stay above the din from the back and get everyone involved. So before we get started, I'm going to introduce our panel members. We have Greg Dick, Carolyn Rayfield, and Hadi Mahabadi. Our first panelist will be Greg Dick. He's the Director of Educational Outreach at Canada's Perimeter Institute for Theoretical Physics, or the Perimeter Institute, as I'll keep calling you later, in Waterloo, Ontario. Perimeter Institute, as you all probably know, is a fast-growing premier institute for physics, and one of the bedrocks of the institution's vision has been outreach and education. So I was delighted to learn that Greg has recently become the Director of Educational Outreach there and is a teacher by training, so he'll have lots of great wisdom to share with us. He's a passionate advocate of science literacy in Canada, has authored textbooks, award-winning educational resources, courses, curriculum, and has gotten involved with sharing his expertise internationally, as I hadn't realized that, as well as nationally. So we're glad that you're with us here. The next speaker after that will be Carolyn Rayfield, who is the Executive Director of Youth Science Ontario. She's got a really interesting career path that maybe she'll share with us during the Q&A session. Starting as a researcher in the biotechnology department at the University of Victoria, Carolyn transitioned to industry doing marketing and sales for a large pharma company. And from there, she moved into consulting on marketing, sales, and strategy for a wide range of companies and industries, from manufacturing to media to retail, consumer goods, as well as the healthcare sector. Carolyn currently teaches part-time in the School of Professional Communications at Ryerson. She's also the president of a startup biotech company, and I think in the time that those of us might be sleeping, she also runs Youth Science Ontario, so it's just remarkable. And our final panel speaker will be Hadi Mahabadi, the Vice President and Director of Xerox Research Centre of Canada. I'm sure for those of you who have hung around Discovery for the last few years, Hadi is a familiar face to all of you around the OCE family. He joined Xerox in 1981 and has held a variety of managerial positions at the research center. He's been instrumental there in creating an environment that increased innovation and successful commercialization of many breakthrough material technologies at XRCC, such as novel solid inks for many of the Xerox inkjet printers and emulsion aggregation toner technology that's used in many of the printers. His leadership efforts in R&D have been recognized by many awards, including 2 of Xerox's highest awards, the University of Waterloo's 2008 Alumni Achievement Medal, and he was ranked as #1 among Print Action Magazine's 50 most influential Canadians in graphic art communications for 2008 and 9. So what I think is particularly insightful for us to realize is Hadi's here to talk about the talent development before they get to Xerox and the importance that that company is actually placing on building talent. So I'm thrilled to have you all here, and I'm looking forward to an exciting hour. So I just want to get started with laying the foundation for the session. And I do want to reference that the session has been supported by the Science and Technology Awareness Network, which is a national umbrella organization for organizations like ours that really share an interest in building science literacy. So we'll get started, and just to lay the foundation, the minister at lunch had some wonderful remarks about how important innovation is and how important it's going to be to ensure that Ontario has a pipeline of people. I think our session is really designed to talk about how do we get people to the point in which all of your companies are going to want to be employing them. How do we get them to the point where the universities and colleges are going to be able to recruit them? And why? Why should we engage young people in science at all? I think we're preaching to the converted at Discovery, so we won't spend a lot of time on it. But over the last couple of generations, it's really clear that science and technology have come to underpin our everyday lives. It's beyond needing to make sure that we have a talent base for innovation, but it's really become a way of needing to have solid citizens, people who can understand how to make everyday choices. How do you deal with what energy sources you want to use? How do you deal with helping to build a world that has potable water and food and healthcare available for people of the world? So science and technology literacy has become, for us at Let's Talk Science, really a way of life and part of good citizenship, as much as it is for actually building the generation of innovators that we need. But we're going to focus on that innovators that we need, because that's really the point of the session for today, and want to draw your attention to some of the stats within the OECD that innovation metrics always tend to hone in on. And if you look at any of the commercialization papers or look at any of the prosperity reports, we usually take a look at building PhDs as a measure of success within the country, within the province. And you can see that we're actually slipping. This is from the most recent OECD numbers. Canada's ranking is falling. It's something that we keep talking about in many of these different meetings. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time with it. And instead I'm going to go to the next slide and say that we think mostly about the PhDs, but we're not talking nearly enough as a country or as a population about what it takes to actually get people into it. So this is a chart that's looking at undergrad degrees and building the argument that one of the reasons why we're not getting people into the master's, the PhD programs and the amounts that some of our decision makers think that we should be is because they're not actually at the younger grades to be drawing on in the pools. So this deck here is also from the more recent OECD numbers published in 2009, looking at the first degree, so undergraduate levels. Canada's improved a little bit from the numbers that came out in 2006, but not in a big way, and we're still quite far down in the rankings with countries that we like to compare ourselves to. So I just want to keep that in mind, and that's at the undergrad level. So we see that the ranking's changing a little bit. There's some cries that our ranking is dropping, but I would argue that the rankings aren't dropping as much as other countries are now reporting. So we're not really going up in the rankings, we're not really going down, but as the Premier has been known to say, we're not necessarily running up on that escalator to stay stable. We're just not doing a lot of changes right now. And we want to talk a little bit about why. So we are seeing that attitudes are improving. There's been some really nice work that's been done in the last year, really for the first time in Canada. The Canada Foundation for Innovation funded a support called the Canadian Science Youth Monitor. And in that, and some research that Let's Talk Science has done, we've seen that some teen attitudes are improving. Generally, there's an interest in science and technology, and the slide shows you that there's a bit of differential stuff depending on whether the kids are born in Canada or born outside of Canada. 92% agree that studying science can lead to a good career. They agree that it's more important now than when their parents were in high school. So the attitudes are pretty positive and they continue to improve. But we have a long way to go still. So just gonna, okay, there we go. And this is some research that we've done, again, also with the Canadian Youth Science Monitor, that almost over a quarter of kids who are 16 to 18 believe that science has no relevance to their everyday life. That almost half of them responded they don't take an additional science credit because they don't need to take one to graduate. And over half said they would definitely not be interested in working in the scientific field. So there's a disconnect in North America in particular about the attitudes that science is important for society, but not all that relevant to me as a young person. And this one is actually quite an interesting slide that shows the point that young people in developed countries tend to see science and technology as just part of their lives, but not something that's really a driver that's really relevant and something they want to influence. This was done taken from a study called The Relevance of Science Education, led out of Norway. And it's showing the inverse relationship between young people's attitudes towards science and the wealth of the country. So we're seeing globally that young people are flocking towards science and engineering degrees in developing countries because it's seen as a way up and a way out. And in developed countries, they're not going to them. So you'll see that inverse relationship. I will point out that Canada is not on the graph largely because we've not been able to find a researcher who would lead the Canadian cohort to understand if this is actually happening. But countries we typically compare ourselves to are showing that kids are not all that interested. So they're seeing it as important for society, but not that relevant to them. And with that as a backdrop, we want to have a discussion today that talks about how can we actually keep the pipeline full and growing and richer so that those stats at the post-secondary level will improve over the next decade. And so companies that want to be hiring and universities that are looking to recruit their science community will actually have a full and rich pipeline of young people to choose from. So with that, I'm going to pass things over, and I think my next slide. Well, there we go. Smooth. Just giving the order of the panel members. There we go. Okay, so we're going to move over to Greg to talk a bit about Perimeter Institute.
Thank you very much, Bonnie. So what I'd like to do in 5 short minutes is just give you a sense of what it is that Perimeter is trying to do in terms of our outreach, in terms of trying to inspire youth across Canada and help feed that talent pipeline. So in terms of our outreach, it's really broken down into 3 tiers. We have a general public engagement strategy, we have a student and teacher educational engagement strategy, and then we have our online presence through our online resources. First, in terms of the general public, we really try to do things locally and then let them grow across the country using the web and online and television to really make a science entertainment option for families and for children. So first, our public lectures. The public lectures, there's 8 of them offered each year. There's a 600-seat theater in a local high school. These lectures sell out. Their tickets are free, but they sell out in 4 minutes or less usually. It just shows the thirst that exists if you provide an opportunity for people to come and to discuss and to share in science, and in our case, modern science and modern physics specifically. The second avenue is our festivals. We try to run a festival every 2 to 3 years. The last one was Quantum to Cosmos. It was incredibly successful. We had 40,000 people arrive to the festival, to the lectures, and to the exhibit. We had a 6,000 square foot tent with hands-on demonstrations and opportunities for families and students and children to engage with a quantum computer and cloud chamber, along with lots of other demonstrations. The festival was 10 days, and again, 40,000 people came to visit, and then through the on-demand online streaming of the lectures and broadcast across the country, we've had over 1 million viewers. So there is again that thirst if you provide that entertainment option. And then the last piece, Quantum Tamers. Quantum Tamers is a documentary on quantum mechanics. It's won 4 awards. It was nominated for 2 Geminis and is currently on the air in over 60 countries. So in terms of our general public, those are our 3 main avenues that we try to engage the general public. In terms of the student and teacher engagement, again, there's 3 tiers in that as well. The first tier is inspirational programming. We try to offer students large-scale opportunities across the country where we'll fill a gymnasium with students from across a region, and with inspirational programming, inspirational talks. Dr. Richard Epp is our superstar who we put on a plane quite often to do that. Then after that inspirational piece, we try to hook them and really supercharge them over, in our case, modern physics, and we have what's called the ISSYP. It's a heck of an acronym. It stands for the International Summer School for Young Physicists. And it's a 2-week program offered every summer. We have 40 students, top physics students from grade 11 and 12 from across the world, 20 Canadian and 20 international, and they come to be supercharged over modern physics. We also have a similar program for teachers in the summer. We combine that inspirational programming with resources, classroom resources, so we can have high-level engagement, deep impact opportunities for students to engage their teachers with the modern physics ideas and content that we try to share. The resources are produced in partnership with the researchers at Perimeter, and that's the added value piece that we're able to deliver. We have leading science, what's happening on the modern edge of physics, and we're able to have full access to that, and then we try to package it and share it in a way that teachers can immediately use with their students. The trick then, and that's where the third piece comes in, is how do we get those resources in front of students? We use something we call our Perimeter Institute Teacher Network. It's a train-the-trainer model where we do workshops with teachers who then do workshops with teachers in their region, and through that technique we can really scale up and we can really reach a lot of students, and we can reach those students with, again, that high impact. It's real content, it's that real science that they get to engage with their students. All those programs put together in terms of the student and teacher world allows us to reach approximately 100,000 students a year. And that's our target metric. This year we're looking to surpass 130,000. So that seems to be working. And the third strategy is online. Everything we do, we try to push to the internet so that it's accessible 24/7, whether it's taping of our public lectures so they're available on demand, or the ISSYP lectures. We also develop resources. So the example I have here is the Power of Ideas. It's an immersive learning environment created for students, teachers, and the general public to go in and see all of those exciting things that happen as science progresses. And that's another key theme that will probably come up more as we talk through the rest of this hour, is that science as a process. And that's just one resource that helps do that. And we also have Alice and Bob, which is the last one there. Visit YouTube, type in Alice and Bob in Wonderland. There's 60-second science clips which take, just by asking questions, pure inquiry, and it leads to some of the most fascinating things about our universe. And Alice and Bob are brother-sister pair that walk you through. There's 9 episodes. They're fun. They're worth taking a look at. And that's the high-level look at what we do at Perimeter. So thank you.
Thanks, Greg. That's good. Oh. Go ahead. That's great. Thanks. Carolyn, over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. As Bonnie said, I've had... It says it's on. Okay, you're good now? Okay, thank you. As Bonnie said, I've had the distinct fortune to have a very diverse career, starting in research, but then moving quite quickly into jobs that had a bridge between science and business. And through that, through the biotech industry, through consulting in science and engineering type organizations, and then even when I went into the nonprofit sector with the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, being that bridge, I've seen a lot of changes in the skill base that's needed to be successful. And when I started with Youth Science Ontario, my motivation really was because the organization focuses so much on building that broad range of skills. Yes, the science, engineering, technology, math, but marrying that with the communications and the interpersonal skills that are going to be so critical to success moving forward for our knowledge-based economy. Youth Science Ontario does this not by necessarily delivering programs directly to kids, but actually by working with local and regional volunteer communities so that they can offer programming in their own community, in their home community, that is sustainable and can be carried on year after year. So some of the things that we do would include things like science fairs. This is a picture of one of the science fairs in Ontario. And you'll see we get kids engaged right from grades 4 and upwards. At grades 7 to 12, they have the opportunity to qualify for the Canada-wide Science Fair. And in fact, we have 200 Team Ontario kids at the Canada-wide Science Fair, all sitting on pins and needles right now because the awards ceremony starts in about 15 minutes. This is last year's Team Ontario. So, they come together at the Canada-wide Science Fair, and just to see the excitement and the interest. And the thing that I notice the most is that when adults come and speak to them about their projects, their eyes light up because somebody's paying attention to the work they're doing. And that's critical. But again, they're learning those communications and interpersonal skills. Which picture is this? Some of the other activities we support include Science Olympics. Science Olympics can be much more team-based. So again, it works on a different level. We also do public outreach. So at events such as Science Rendezvous, we'll bring a mini Science Olympics to family groups and start to get them engaged as the little ones there in the corner. At the time that picture was taken, she had the top score in the penny float. And you can see the excitement on her face. What's this one? Now, I mentioned that we support regional volunteer community groups. One of the ways that we do this is through an annual conference specifically for youth science volunteers. One of the things that I say to people is most people join a youth science volunteer group to do kids in science, but somebody has to make sure that organization is sustainable. So somebody's got to do the volunteer recruiting and the fundraising and the paperwork and these kinds of things. And we'll bring them together once a year to talk about how do we strengthen those organizations in the community. And we find that that's something that's not always done. They don't always have access to that because they're operating in their own local silos. They're in their own community, and they don't, they could have a great idea in Timmins, but they don't have a way to share that. So we act as that bridge between these organizations so that they can learn from each other, and we can bring in expertise to help them out as well. We work with organizations that deal with kids from K to 12, so right through from the youngest on up. And as I said, our focus is on supporting Ontario-based regions. That's a number of them that we support. For the purpose of developing inquiry-based programs in communities from the smallest communities in Ontario to the largest, so that we have students developing those critical thinking skills, the communication skills, and the interpersonal skills that we're going to need not only in today's market, but in tomorrow's market as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Carolyn.
Yeah, I am representing the industry in this panel. As you notice, the other panelist is mostly in the education part. and they do a significant amount of work in the area of inspiring and encouraging. We as an industry could also participate and help in this area. But of course, our main activity is not education. Being representative of knowledge-based industry, we produce product which impact the life of human beings. And through that, we could encourage indirectly and let people know how the knowledge-based economy could impact the life of people, and through that is a way to encourage people to get involved. You know, nowadays you see that technology is everywhere and people are using it and make the life easier. I have to say what Xerox did is decentralize printing. Now, before Xerox innovation, there was few major print shops around the world and not much information sharing. Information was in hand of a few because it was centralized. What Xerox invention was to decentralize printing rather than having only maybe 100 or 1,000 major print shops around the world and only 1 million pages of information being shared among the people around the world. Now you have printers and copiers and all of the technology in every home, in every offices, small and medium-sized businesses, and everybody using, and more than 800 trillion pages of information now being shared among people. So what Xerox did, decentralized, and this is what people could feel and realize what science and technology could do. So that is on the public learning, which company like Xerox and other knowledge-based company, through their product development, could teach to the public how important science and technology are. Of course, this is important part of the industry's responsibility, but we also get involved with encouraging and teaching, but not in a big way. Xerox is involved in expanding the knowledge-based talent from high school to universities and at a graduate level. Starting in university, which is a very important aspect of our activities, we hire quite a bit of co-op students, close to 40 co-op students. In our research center, we are involved with the process of inventing and commercializing. This is a very important area of innovation, and when we hire 40 co-op every year, we teach them how to invent, how to commercialize. This is by practical ways, encouraging them that they could go to the graduate study, continue their study to the master and PhDs. And we monitor those co-op students, and we see majority of them continue their study from undergraduate to master and PhD. And as you noticed, one of the areas that Canada is behind in the knowledge-based talent is the number of PhD and masters. So that way we help. We bring a lot of international skill, but they cannot absorb to Canadian workforce because they don't have experiences. So our research center get involved to help those who have skills and ready to work, but just need the Canadian work experience to get them involved for 6 months in our research center, and then we help them to try to find a job, whether we hire them or if they fit our requirement, or if we need resources to hire, or we help them to find a job. We work very closely with universities on the area of a research collaboration. This is an area that again goes to the master and PhD level, and again make sure that a student at university deal with the research which is a real problem in the world. And then in the encouragement at the high school level, This is a recent activity by our research center. We work with organizations which are involved in this area, like Let's Talk Science and others, and go to the high school and try to encourage the kids at the stage that they want to make a decision that whether to take the science or math course or not, and encourage them and let them know how important science and technology is to their life and to the future of Canada. And through that, they could become interested in science and technology. There are other activities like special seminar that we have every year that again focus on the university and open to university, and we bring the best speakers to Xerox Research Center, and then the university members close to our research center could participate in this. So these are some of the examples of what we are doing in our
Thanks, Hadi.
research.
Very good. Yeah. It's terrific. So I think everyone sees there's quite a broad spectrum of activity and different perspectives that are being taken by the panel members. So we have about 28 minutes and 57 seconds with which we can do a little bit of an open floor. But I just want to get started with a question around some key messages. So for the panel members, given that this conference really is an innovation showcase for business and post-secondary institutions, what is the key message about the importance of increasing youth interest in inquiry-based science and technology that you really want to convey to these audiences from your respective organization, and maybe covering some perceived barriers to youth engagement? And that might get everyone thinking, and then we'd like to open it up. Who wants to go first?
I think one of the key messages is that we do have a lot going on from the university. You mentioned a lot of the stuff that you're doing with university students and connecting them with business. But kids make decisions about which way they're going in terms of university in grades 8, 9, and 10. It's based on the choices of courses that they make then, and if they choose wrong, it will limit their choices. So they might get to grade 12 and decide they'd like to do engineering or sciences, but if they haven't got the prerequisites, they can't. And very few of them are necessarily willing to take an extra year to make it happen because they're so focused on getting out of high school and moving forward. So we need to get them much earlier. We know from research that's been done in the past that at grade 4, 80% of kids say they like or love science. By grade 12, it's down in the 30-40% range. So, it's nosediving. We need to get them in that earlier stage. We need to get them engaged, doing inquiry-based work early, not waiting until they get to university before they get to do their research that they're actually interested in.
Sure. So the inquiry-based perspective that I would also like to completely agree with Carolyn, and then the other piece of the inquiry-based learning is that it is the most authentic way. It provides the most authentic opportunity for teachers to provide students with opportunities to develop their problem-solving skills. And problem-solving skills lead and innovation. Problem-solving skills are the building block for that kind of success. So providing students with the opportunity for inquiry-based learning is crucial. It's also crucial on a second front, and this is more aligns with the science specifically that we deal with. But essentially, if we use inquiry-based opportunities for students to engage in science, they will see science as a process. It's the best way of understanding this world we live in, and it's a process that grows with knowledge and with discovery. And if you think back to your grade 9 days, you learn about the atom, and then in grade 11, you learn a different version of the atom, which has some quantum mechanics in it. If science was presented to you as a series of facts, that disconnect from grade 9 to grade 11 can be very frustrating, and I have seen that so often. It's so very frustrating to students. They get the impression that science doesn't really know what they're talking about. They teach us one thing and then they flip it and teach us something else. Instead, if science is taught through the inquiry-based strategies, that it's this process. Then instead of being frustrated with new discovery, they pick up that newspaper and they read, we've learned something new that invalidates something we thought, it's celebrated. And that's the hook, I think, which will get your top students hooked into loving what science is all about, because it's a mystery to be solved. So inquiry-based opportunities are crucial to getting those good kids to stick with science, we believe.
I agree with both of the panelists. What I would like to add is, apart from being able to increase the capacity of our science-based talent, we need also to change or improve the quality. And this is important in the university. We in Canada training a student to graduate and go find a job in other industry. While in those countries which are very successful in on innovation, they train their students to be entrepreneurs, to go and start a company, that company hires others. So it's different. One is looking for a job, another are creating job. So that quality, for example, when you look to the university in Israel, majority of the students graduate, they are trying to create a new company, which those company hires. So job creation is outcome of the graduation, while in Canada they are graduating to go and work for established companies. So that's is a quality in the education that I believe is also needed to.
Not sure where the other mic went, but if anyone has any questions, please do come up to the microphone. Just a couple of comments, though, from myself, touching on what the panel members said. Carolyn talked about the importance of reaching kids at grade 8 or 9, and I have to say that a couple of years ago was the first empirical study that was published in the magazine Science that really did link looking at attitudes towards the potential of seeing yourself in a science career at grade 8, translating into a much greater likelihood of being in those fields. The researchers drew upon the longitudinal studies in the US that were tracking kids, and they went back to the 1988 cohort, looked at the questions, then the grade 8ers were answering, did you see yourselves in science-based careers, went through the data, age 30 to 35, interviewed them, and it's the first study that's linked very clearly that those kids in grade 8 that had suggested that they would even possibly think about a career in that area were twice as likely to be having followed up in life sciences and almost 4 times likely in the physical sciences, engineering, technology fields. So it's really quite interesting. Greg was touching on the importance of introducing inquiry-based methods at elementary school and high school, and frankly what we're talking about there is the way R&D is done at a university, at a company. We don't teach kids using the method, and it's often not until you get to university or start a master's degree that you really truly understand what an inquiry-based approach is, and that's really important. And Hadi touched on building the entrepreneurial skills, which I think is something that we often think about tangentially, and we really do need to figure out how do we start talking about driving innovation with an arts background, a science and tech and math background, and this overlay of understanding commerce, or we're really never going to get the kids coming out of the system that we need. Anyways, Jonathan, first question.
So my question is related to a session I was at that was hosted by the Ministry of Economic Development and Trade a few months ago, where they focused on Xerox, as a matter of fact, as being one of Canada's top companies in terms of having a very diverse workforce that is extremely involved in the innovation coming out of the organization. And recognizing that, based on the stats you showed earlier, Bonnie, the immigrant kids coming to Canada had much more interest in science and technology. Has there been any concerted effort to reach out into our diverse community as a whole to continue to influence that as they go through the education system? And how do you see that working?
Sure. Does anyone want to talk about programs that they've done to reach out into new immigrant families?
I guess this is a very important point from several point of view. In our research center, we are trying to hire from all all kind of researchers from all kind of background. So we have something like 30 to 37 different cultural background. Diversity and diversity of thought is very important to the innovation. So when we are talking about innovation and knowledge-based innovation, this is very important. But any company or any organization which deliver a service or a product for the customer, it's going to be a diverse group of customers. So knowledge of the customer, which is diverse, is important in the design of a product or service we deliver. So that's another important aspect of it. So within the Xerox, we are not doing because this is a good thing, because this is a right for our business. And the way we do it, we look for the highest quality people, but we also try to make sure that our environment is diverse. And every team, every group of people which are working in a project have a diverse group of people, whether from cultural background or from any other aspect of the diversity, which resulted in much better decision making, much better result, or product design and service delivery to the customer.
I mentioned earlier that we have 200 Team Ontario kids up at the Canada-wide this year, and one of the things that I've been really encouraged by is that it is such a diverse community of kids participating, and this is at the national level. So they're coming from everywhere, and not just different cultural and ethnic backgrounds, but we've started having kids with a wide range of disabilities who maybe in the past wouldn't have participated. We've had to train judges how to judge science fair projects from kids with autism, because that connect between the judge, if the student doesn't look them in the eye, well, that used to be a mark down, but we have to start educating people how to work with this broader base of community groups. We've engaged many more Aboriginal groups to join the science fairs, and their projects integrate their Aboriginal culture and science, and they're amazing projects to look at. So I do see at the regional level, the regional fairs, pulling in groups from all different communities to participate at the regional fair level and then pushing them on to the national level.
In terms of what our outreach programs do, the one that we focus most directly in terms of diversity, and it's geographic diversity across Canada, is that summer program for students. We work very diligently to ensure that we have representation from all the provinces and all the territories. And that is as well as an exactly even mix between males and females, so that there is that honest mix. There is also the advantage of the reason there's 20 Canadian and 20 international students is for us it's a way to emulate what physics research especially, what it is. It isn't bounded by geographic boundaries or national boundaries. It's very much a global endeavor, and we pair each Canadian student within an international student, so they start to make those bonds early on, because those bonds and those relationships will carry them through their career. The other point that we're doing actually just currently is our current resource. It's on particle physics, and we're developing it in partnership with CERN. One of the reasons we've partnered with CERN, besides the fact that the LHC is the particle physics experiment at the moment, is that their willingness, they'll translate our finished resource into up to 150 different languages to make it that much more accessible. So it's those kind of partnerships that we look for to really leverage and scale the impact that we can have.
Thanks. Do you have a question?
I was really struck by the idea that we need to be teaching entrepreneurship, because I think that's very true. And one of the challenges there is entrepreneurship is it's an interdisciplinary phenomenon, right? And the public school system is not interdisciplinary, or most of the time there tend to be these divisions among the different departments, and I think if students were more aware that a career in science and technology isn't just going to be this solitary thing that's deep tech and nothing else. Perhaps they'd be more interested in pursuing these careers. What challenges or opportunities do you see in breaking down the barriers between departments in the public school system so that kids understand this concept early on?
It's a great question. Who wants to start with that one? Hadi?
I guess some of the schools, some of the universities which are very good in this, for science and technology undergraduate courses, there is also courses every year, which is some element of entrepreneurship. And student could take it, and as this could be as a course that is elective, rather than art course and so on and so forth. There are certain degree of course which are elective. So they are trying, some of those successful universities already replace some of the elective course with entrepreneurship courses. So the student have option to take those whether compared with other elective courses. Now I heard in Canada some of the universities start doing this. So they are including some of those courses. There are also attempts that after getting an undergraduate degree in science and technology, you could go to a course, a 1 year or 2 year course, which is focused on entrepreneurship courses. But I guess the more university get involved with practical way of doing things in every years with a project that a student have to do and create something out of it, could help them more. But if we look to a Scandinavian country and China and Korea, we see that in their university, as a part of their teaching, entrepreneurship is part of it, and that is the way that the student learn from it.
I have to say I don't have an answer for you exactly. But what I can tell you is for the last 3 years when I've been at the Canada-wide, I've had more and more questions from the students and from the adults that are chaperoning them at the event, asking me, what can we do for these kids around intellectual property and commercialization knowledge? How can we get that information to them? Because they're not doing volcanoes anymore. The stuff they're doing is up here. I've got a grade 10 kid who was here yesterday with me. He did his research at the hospital for sick kids. This is not little stuff anymore, right? And they're starting to ask the questions about, you know, what is patenting? Do I need to do this? How does this happen? Once I get a patent, then what? And they're really moving down that road towards commercialization themselves. And I think it doesn't hurt when they see things like, you know, pictures of an exceedingly young Bill Gates and the Facebook guys, and they think, yeah, we don't have to be 956 years old before we can start a company. We could do it now. So I'm seeing that trend, and that's really encouraging. We just have to get them the information.
I'll speak to the opportunity for cross-disciplinary opportunities for students if I put my science department head hat back on, which I wore just a few years ago. The opportunities for students are growing. There certainly is a recognition of the need that we can't be siloed. You can't do science on its own without math and without the social impacts and the business components. So there are, in fact, course codes now in the current Ontario curriculum which are designed to facilitate those specific connections, and those connections can be made by a keen teacher who wants to develop a very specialized program. So there is opportunity, and it's growing with time. Interestingly, with our last resource we made last year on GPS, it highlights that as we make our resources, one of the processes that we use is we certainly need teachers to help us build them. We have our researchers, our teachers, and our in-house support. The teachers help to identify and to create components of the resource that would let it plug not only into the science and physics classroom, but grade 9 and 10 science classrooms, into math classrooms, into geography classrooms, and it dealt with some of the social issues and the changing face that GPS is bringing to just day-to-day life. So there's a recognition of the problem, certainly, and there are steps being taken. So I'm optimistic.
And just even going down to the elementary level, one of the probably the greatest challenges, but the best opportunities, is at the elementary level. Teachers are not necessarily team teaching, but they are required to teach a broad array of subjects. So the challenge is that in Ontario, many elementary school teachers don't themselves have a science background, which causes some challenges. And how do you build the confidence of the teachers? But with a bit of coaching, they actually have more capacity to play within the curriculum, to do the interdisciplinary things and create projects and help the kids work on projects that can also build the commerce skills, the science skills, the math skills, the literacy skills, and do it all in an integrated way. So there's lots of potential there. One of the other issues, though, that I've confronted is that whole definition of science, where you raise the issue of people who want to break the stereotype of science only being isolated, working in a lab. I can't tell you the number of senior officials right across the country that when you say the word science, they think university research. And in fact, we start seeing in the college level, the number of diplomas that are requiring science and technology and math skills far outweighs the number in the university sector. We have a problem, or when we see the hierarchy of health and we see energy and we see environment, but we don't see an integrator of science and technology that's actually pulling everything together. It's bigger than just kids thinking they're going to be alone in a lab. So we have an issue there. Do you have another question? Yeah, want to come join us?
So I'm Jamie Doran. I manage the OCE Connections program. So I love this whole talent thing. The OCE invests in students doing R&D from undergrad to the graduate level and postdoc level. And then what we do is we invest in talent development like soft skills. So we teach them about business and project management and entrepreneurship. So keep that in mind. What's missing? If we had extra funds, what should we spend it on?
Our pitch would be starting before university. So going back into the pipeline and really building a culture with the parents, with the kids, with the teachers, to recognize that by the time they get to university, they're making choices that would pull them into your program for that skill building would be mine. See, is Roxy going to the mic or no? Any other comments?
Sure, as the mic passes by, I'll grab it. The short answer from the perimeter perspective is our strategies, our programs, from inspirational programming through students to the resources we make and getting it out to them through our teacher network. We can reach 100,000. With more resources, we can reach 200,000. And we can build more targeted resources that target specifically Aboriginal communities or specific niche needs. So there's absolutely no trouble for us to find good ways to put extra resources to use.
And I'm going to make a bit of a pitch for the extracurricular stuff, only because, in areas like sports, we see kids have opportunities for hockey and football and skating and all sorts of things. But we don't have that same range of diverse activities after school for kids. And not every kid's going to want to do a science fair project. Maybe they want to do robotics. Maybe they want to do bridge building. But if a community doesn't have that range of activities, some of those kids are left out. There isn't something that speaks to them. So the schools are great and the teachers are amazing, but we still need that after-school activity where they can hone in on the specific things that they're interested in. So the kids go to school, they do PE and they do all sorts of stuff, but if they like basketball, they can do that after school. If they like chess, they can do that after school. They can do other things that hone in on their specific interests. And we need to build that range of stuff for after-school programs for kids.
I have a short answer for you. I guess on OCE, whatever you do with university, they are already in science and technology. So you should focus on entrepreneurship scale, because they are already in science and technology. And if there is additional funding, use that funding in the high school, grade, I guess, 8 or 9, just to encourage them to get into the science technology, that later on you could teach them entrepreneurship.
As it's going back, I'm just going to steal it for one more second. I teach communications at Ryerson. So I teach business students, IT management students, engineers, the communications course that they hate, right? I've often threatened to bring some of my science fair kids into the classroom because in those programs, they're developing communication skills that go well beyond what they would normally get the chance to develop even in university level. So that's why I make the pitch for those after school where they can really get in deep and experience science and experience how to communicate it.
Thank you. We've got less than 5 minutes left, and I actually want to give the panel members one more chance to make a last pitch. So if you've got a really quick question, we can take that, and then we'll kind of close up because I have one final question I want to pose to them too.
This is something that Is it on? Okay. So my name is Shahram Yousefi. I'm a professor of electrical engineering at Queen's. And when I'm not doing my solitary research, I find myself volunteering at schools. So this is something that I'm very passionate about, pedagogical aspects of science and technology. So as a piece of fact, we know that enrollment and interest in technology and science has gone down. We've been talking about that at the provincial, federal level, and this is not a problem unique to Canada. How do we increase enrollments to back? We started with 300 students going to engineering, and now we're looking at 100 at Queen's, and some other places are suffering from the same thing. So to me, I think this is going back and investing money where we have a critical age, and that's before 18, 19-year-old time, before you enter university. So I've volunteered with 2 programs. One is Engineering Residence Program by PEO in Ontario, and another one is TISP, Teacher in Service Program that IEEE, Institute for Electrical Electronic Engineers, they're putting significant funding into this to go back to the numbers we had before and probably beyond. I was wondering, and that question applies to everyone at the panel, what kind of programs do you have interest or you've started that go back to that critical age?
Well, I think we've all spoken about a number of the programs that we actually do, and Let's Talk Science has got programs that start at child care centers. So we really do go right through that, and I would actually encourage you to stay afterwards because we've only got about 3 minutes left. And I'd like to kind of build on your question about how do you invest earlier and leave the panel members to give us our final thoughts on how do we move this onto a political agenda? How do we phrase this both at the provincial and federal levels? Because frankly, this file is not really overtly owned anywhere at the provincial or federal level, and it's always somebody else's issue. The feds say education is provincial mandate, and then we go. So as we part today, and I want to thank everyone for being with us, I really do want to get your feedback on how do we position this politically?
In 30 seconds or less, yeah. I think there's absolutely we need to put it on the political radar. For sure, and I think it can be done from grassroots programs, which are in the schools and the public outreach that can be done, all the way through to those closed-door conversations with ministers. And the Perimeter Institute, we have opportunity to do all of those things. I think there's a secondary way to do that, and that's play to our niche strengths. So the example that I would like to share, the current physics curriculum in Ontario, in its first draft, it stopped at 1898. Modern physics was taken out. So that plays in our sandbox. So we marshaled teachers, we went and met with the curriculum writing teams, and in the end, the final draft does include modern physics. So that's an example where in those opportunities arise, we have to be ready to engage the right people and ensure that we put the pressure on to make the connection between why modern physics matters and the innovative and technological world we live in.
30 seconds.
I think in order to make that change, it has to happen at multiple levels. I can guarantee you that every single one of you live in a community that has youth science organizations. Like you were saying that you volunteer. Go volunteer. You'll help raise the awareness in your local community. At the regional and provincial level, we need to partner with organizations like Xerox, corporate organizations that understand how important it is to foster this energy in our youth. Because we can't come at it alone as nonprofits. We need that coalition to make it happen, to make our voices be heard. And if we all say it's important, people will listen.
I guess this is those countries which are very successful in this area. The country take this as a national agenda. They create sense of urgency. Sometimes sense of urgency in Ireland was against wall. There was no other way rather than doing this. In Canada, we are prosperous. We have a very good life. So a leadership needed to create a sense of urgency from knowledge point of view, not from the fact that we don't have anywhere else to go. The fact that we have wells is good for us. This is an opportunity. This is something we could build on it. But it has to be created a sense of urgency, and then the stakeholder, which is businesses, university, education system in country, other organization, volunteer organization, and government together create a strategy and implement it.
With that, I want to thank the panel members, Greg, Carolyn, and Hadi, for sharing your expertise and really helping us think through this issue. I want to thank all of you for coming here today and participating in this session. And I really want to thank the Discovery organizers for putting this on the agenda this year and helping us have an opportunity to reach back and talk about something I think is a really important topic. So with that, I'll say thank you to everybody.
I do want to echo Bonnie's thanks to all the panelists, including you, Bonnie. Thank you very much for sharing some interesting perspectives with us. And I'm sure you'll enjoy the rest of the show. Thanks.